going to present our first speaker of the day today. We have Clinton Day, and his talk is called How to Start a Successful Business Using Lean Startup and a Burning Desire. Clint Day, MBA, is a seasoned entrepreneur and educator dedicated to empowering individuals for personal and financial freedom through their entrepreneurship. With 4 successful businesses and educational programs for college students and veterans, he integrates evidence-based entrepreneurship methods in his teachings. Clint holds certifications in entrepreneurship education from prestigious institutions and serves as veteran in residence at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University's RISE program. His mission, guide aspiring entrepreneurs with risk-reducing strategies towards financial independence. Please give a round of applause for Clint.
Thank you. I didn't know my act would be so hard to follow. Your act. Thank you for coming. Hello? Okay. I am going to present to you, I'm kind of like JB, I'm going to use this occasion to announce my formula. I call the 40-year formula. I spent 30 years as a serial entrepreneur starting insurance agencies with my wife, Donna, who's in the rear operating the slides. And then I spent 10, almost 11 years at the college level teaching entrepreneurship. So I promise you, I don't know much, but I know entrepreneurship, and the formula I'm going to give you works. And the process that will be the second half of the formula, called Lean Startup, came out of Silicon Valley, and it was used to start some household names. Airbnb, Uber, Dropbox, Google used it, and Facebook. So it's a very successful formula. And the reason it's successful, I may just keep talking because she will get my sound on my lapel. It's a successful formula for one simple reason. They get evidence-based facts from the end user. The person to whom you're going to sell the product or the service actually helps you design the product or the service. So it's a very powerful concept. And with no further ado, the title of my talk is actually Unleashing the Power of Entrepreneurship. And Donna and I use this definition for success: how to become personally and financially successful, free. And it's such a wonderful state. I can't tell you how satisfying it is to be able to help other people with some money and to help other people start their own business. And that's what I've done the last 11 years. It's wonderful. And because I was teaching in the college level, I would mentor other startup teams, and I actually learned part of the psychology of this formula. So next slide, please. There's 2 events. I want you to visualize the first one. Donna and I were in the U.S. Army at the Presidio of San Francisco back in the last century. And we got out. I was a captain, she was a lieutenant, and we got married. And we were in the San Francisco Bay Area, so we went to work in downtown San Francisco. She at University of California Hospital above Golden Gate Park, Parnassus Heights. Me in the 4 or 8 square blocks of mayhem called the Financial District. And I was working for an insurance broker while she worked for the staff at UCSF as a physical therapist. Long story short, when we got out of the Army, it was a very less structured but more constrictive lifestyle. We were commuting into the city. We used to go across the Golden Gate Bridge into the Presidio of San Francisco and park your car, maybe a 15-minute drive right in front of your building. Whereas when we started working downtown, we would drive she would drop me off at the Golden Gate Toll Plaza, and I would get on a bus and go the other 45 minutes into the city. So it was what Henry Thoreau called a life of quiet desperation. We were kind of not happy, and we have always been a mastermind. When we met, we realized we both had read the self-improvement book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. So we called in sick one day and took about 3 hours brainstorming how we wanted our life to change. And in those days, there were no computers. So we went to the branch library, the Marin County Library, and researched where in the United States these criteria might take us. And it was a city in Northeast Florida I had never been to called Jacksonville, Florida, and one Donna had only been to once for a Georgia-Florida game, because she was a Georgia Bulldog. So we moved there cold cock. I mean, this is a crazy story. We sold our furniture, jumped in the car, and drove across the country. And I remember sitting in a budget motel writing out our resumes by hand. And we both got jobs for self-employed people in our field. Me, a bonding insurance agent that did construction insurance, which I had learned, and she for the self-employed physical therapist in the medical district. And our whole plan was to go in business for ourselves. So we were mentoring these people as best we could. And that's part of the way to really get started as an entrepreneur. And when the time came, after about a year and a half, we quit our jobs and went in business for ourselves. And Donna actually beat me because she had an opportunity to become the clinic for 2 orthopedic surgeons. A great business model because she automatically had referrals of the patients for these 2 doctors. So it was her income that bootstrapped me in an insurance agency. I tell the story in my Ignite book, Ignite the Entrepreneur, about the serendipity that led me to this little regional company out of Atlanta called Cotton States. It kept hitting me in the face. They would beat me on a rural electric in South Georgia. They would write auto dealers less expensive than anyone else. And so I stuck my neck out, and when I flew to Atlanta to place an umbrella policy for my own rural electric co-ops, I just went straight to Cotton States. And I committed myself to having them own my book of business and be a direct writing agent, which is very different than an independent. They owned my book of business until I earned my right at 5, 10, and 15 years to own it myself. But nevertheless, I did that, and it was one of the best moves I ever made because I literally wrote accounts as fast as I could get them. I had been trained in corporate insurance in California, so I applied that learning to, the things they wrote. And God forbid they even wrote fleet buses for school districts. And before I left Jacksonville 7 years later, I wrote the Duval County bus fleet, I think the largest account I ever wrote. And there were 750 buses in that fleet. So it was a very nice premium and an even better commission. So why do I tell you this story? I think one of the reasons we were successful in Jacksonville was we were in a vacuum. And if you've ever heard the story of Jeff Bezos, he moved to Seattle for the same reason. No family, no ties, to work his formula. And obviously he was very successful because he founded a little company called Amazon. And we didn't realize it at the time, but not having those distractions, we were able to focus on our goals. And we achieved them. And I hope we're going to see a slide here where you can see my beautiful picture of an insurance agency with a storefront and of a physical therapy clinic, which we both achieved within 2 years. And because Donna was a physical therapist, she would do my books on the weekends. And we eventually thought she's very good at selling. If you talk to her in the next 2 days, you'll realize why. And so what she would do is come over to me and become the health producer. In other words, go out and write group medical for the same accounts I was writing property and casualty on. And we had a formula, a business model that just kept clicking and clicking. And only one beautiful story I can tell you is the first day, about the 8th month, we were so naive, we booked the premium, the commissions, on a cash basis, when in reality, all the other insurance agents booked the income on an accrual basis, meaning if you wrote an account, you counted 12 months commission like it was there. So we were actually making less money than we realized. But when we counted it up at 8 months, we were ecstatic. And we went out to a discotheque on the south side of Jacksonville. I can still remember it, called the Foxfire Inn. And since that night, neither one of us have touched Southern Comfort whiskey. We can't look at it. It was too wild of a night. But it was such a great feeling to be making money away from a salary. Remember my book title is Set Your Own Salary. And I incredibly support anyone else trying to do it. And what we say in Lean Startup is fail fast, fail often. You have to try. You have to try many times and adjust. And we say you either iterate, where you just make a tweak in your plan, or you pivot. You give up the idea completely and start with a new product or service, and that is Lean Startup. So now I'm going to try and go into it. These are the pictures for the insurance agency and the Lean Startup. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to sum up. Oh, wait a minute, go back. I'm going to sum up our time in Jacksonville. We outgrew it. We had some accounts we'd written in Atlanta. My companies were based in Atlanta, so we eventually moved to Atlanta. And in the process, we had learned you can sell your agency for a profit. And who knew, but if you have a revenue, a stream of income, it is always sellable to somebody that wants that stream of income. So no matter what business you're in, at some point in time, you can sell it. And it's a wonderful retirement asset. And so we had learned that about the second year I was in business. The largest agent in Jacksonville took me to lunch. And he wanted to buy my agency. I just had no idea at the time. But they had all tried to steal my company since it was so competitive. And he was trying to get the company by buying my agency. We just stored that away for the future. And 7 years later, we actually sold and moved into Atlanta, Georgia. So in the end, we did a third agency, which was not as stressful, because I'm going to give you a story of what happened to me in the second biggest one. In the third agency, we were just one product, one company, and 5 southeastern states, and wholesaled. We sold through other agents, so it was a much less stressful business model. Next slide, please. I want to show you how Donna and I became successful so you can do it too. That's really my kicks in life right now. So let me have you visualize us on this airplane here. In fact, we were on it last night. We got in at 1:30 this morning on one of them things. But we were flying from Los Angeles. We were in Atlanta, but we were out there to visit an auto dealer general agent in LA. And we were flying up to my home. I'm born and raised in San Francisco, and I went to UC Berkeley. So we were about 2/3 of the way through this trip, and out of the blue, I had a most scary thing happen. I all of a sudden had a burst of fresh blood into my mouth, and my saliva was full of fresh blood, red, fresh blood, scary as heck. And it didn't stop until I had surgery. And what happened was when we landed in San Francisco, we went straight to the hospital she used to work at, University of California Medical Center, and I saw the neurosurgeon. And what I had was a benign tumor called a pituitary tumor, and it is an imbalance of a prolactin hormone. And all my hormones were out of whack because it was affecting my pituitary. And it's at the base of your brain in a little valley called the sella teresia. But long story short, I had to fly home to Atlanta and have surgery at Emory, when it was 99% successful by that time, because over the last 25 years, they had developed a transsphenoidal through a microscope through your upper lip, which, was far less risky than the old method of through your skull, the cranium surgery. So I was very lucky that had come about. I was also lucky that they had developed a medication for Parkinson's disease called bromocriptine or percolide that suppressed by chemical reaction the prolactin hormone. So I took that for 10 years, and I was, if you can call me normal, I was normal health at that point. But this particular incident here changed our life. Next slide, please. And what it did was I had to make some changes. I was at the height of my career. We had 12 employees. Donna was producing equal volume in health accounts. I was producing 3 specialties. I encourage you when you go in business to specialize. You must have a specialty product and put it with a market niche to really spark, because you have to compete against a huge universe of products and markets. So what we did was I had 3 specialties. I had learned rural electric co-ops from the broker I worked for in Jacksonville. And Cotton States wrote rural electrics because they were beating me on some accounts. I had learned auto dealers because Cotton States wrote them. So I had a book of, a dozen auto dealers in Jacksonville. And before I quit in Atlanta, I had 15. And they had large chains, a couple of them. And the third thing was I did service and subcontractors from my background in California. And Cotton States wrote surety bonds too. They were crazy. And I would write surety bonds that other people had difficult getting. So when you write a surety bond for a contractor, that gives them a public job. You have to have a guarantee to protect the public called a surety guarantee. And if you can get the bond, you can get the job. So those 3 specialties were always my bailiwick, and I've always had a 4th one in reserve. And sure enough, in the last agency, I had to use it. And I won't go into that story, but I always have one in reserve. So next slide. I've never seen these so big. So what is entrepreneurship? Why should you care? You recognize some faces here, right? Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, J.B. Owen up in the upper left, certainly a very successful entrepreneur. And what all these unicorns are people that started a business and it rose to a value of $1 billion or more. So, all these .com billionaires are up there. Elon Musk. The guy in the middle you probably recognize founded Google was Sergey. And some of the women, this is the gal that invented Spanx over here on the right. And above her is your famous entertainer, Taylor Swift. And the gal in the middle was the assistant to Mark Zuckerberg building Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg. And so a lot of women today are successful entrepreneurs. There's never been more opportunity for a woman entrepreneur than there is in 2024. But why do I say this? I don't want you really to visualize these. When you see the next slide, please, I want you to visualize Main Street, USA, because most of the entrepreneurs that are the backbone of the U.S. economy are either the local pharmacist, the hardware store owner, or maybe a plumber at the end of the street with 4 or 5 trucks out back. Those are the backbone. In 2023, there were 33 million small businesses in the U.S. And they define small business as 500 employees or less. But in reality, they're more like 10 to 25. We got up to 12 before I had my crisis with health. And so that's what I want you to picture, and that's what you can do. And the way you can do it is, next slide, please. I have a formula to leave you with today. And I'm telling you, the reason at the end I show you my credentials is I am qualified to speak on entrepreneurship. I've been there, done it, and I've taught it. And some of my students have gone on to very successful businesses. And so the first part of the equation is based on my 30 years of practicing, the second half teaching. And what the teaching half did was tell me about psychology. I put passion at 50% in my formula. If you can create a passion for whatever thing you start up in either product or a service, and you can just thoroughly enjoy helping people with it or doing it every day, and you put it together with a technique that Silicon Valley gave us called Lean Startup, you will succeed. Now, you've got to have a couple of traits known to entrepreneurs like persistence and opportunity thinking and work well in teams, because you really do have to be a personality. Even if you don't have one, you can hire someone who's got one, because you do a lot of marketing one-on-one, and you have to have someone represent your brand. Next slide, please. So what is the formula? I guess it's coming up in a moment. Passion leads to belief, which translates into positive expectation. I'm the only one teaching entrepreneurship who has a whole section on my website, setyourownsalary.com, on resilience. Why do I teach resilience? I had to sell my agency because I got real sick. And everybody who's an entrepreneur works 24/7 to start. But when you get through that second or third year and you can afford to pay someone, by all means, pay them. Get some help. I thought nobody could come to work for me who produced insurance because he would steal my accounts. Wrong. When I finally sold the agency in Atlanta, they split my book of business between myself and 2 other guys. We never lost a beat. We never lost an account, because you can transfer it to other people. So next slide, please. The actual slide looks like, this is the psychology behind passion. And if you took sociology or psychology in college, you probably heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Anybody? See, this is a triangle, a pyramid that shows basic needs at the bottom. Physiological, roof over your head, food, security, love and belonging. Up the top, self-esteem, but at the very tip of the pyramid, self-actualization. That's nothing more than being proactive. And the famous holy grail of entrepreneurship is Babson College in Wellesley, Massachusetts, where I earned a certificate. And Babson calls it ETA, entrepreneurial thought in action. You got to just do it. The Nike swish, take action. So self-actualization was really studied by this crazy Hungarian on the right, a name which I have difficulty pronouncing, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I just call him Mihaly, but he's a Hungarian psychologist who developed the concept and studied optimal experience. Optical experience is flow. And when we say you're in the zone, if you can remember Michael Jordan or a very famous athlete doing what he did, they were in a zone. They were in a completely different world. And you actually can get yourself to this world in self-employment, being an entrepreneur. I definitely got there in 2 of my agencies where I was just doing everything right. I was calling in the right accounts. I had the right product, and I was knocking them over as fast as I could get to them. I didn't have a passion so much for insurance, but I had a passion for the commissions. it brought to me. Thank you. So Michele came up with what's called flow. A lot of people abbreviate it as flow. Next slide, please. And what you do is you put that together with lean startup, and you have my formula. Entrepreneurship taps the fundamental need we all have for autonomy and self-determination. You're born with creativity as a child. And you notice how kids have an imagination in the playpen with, the Legos and everything. Well, they lose it about age 5 or 6 because we start beating it out of them with discipline and structure. But it's there. It's there when you're an adult, just waiting to be discovered. And the other half of it is, the passion comes from the flow when you just trust you can get to a point where work becomes play. That sounds really crazy, but when work becomes play, you're going to get rich. You really will. And you can enjoy it. And one of the joys of entrepreneurship is when you get a little extra money. The great thing is after you pay taxes, the rest of it's yours. I repeat that. After you pay taxes, the rest of it's yours. And you can do good. I mean, I've always sponsored a third world child through World Vision, and we do crazy things. We donated the Fab Lab to Ecker College, one of my 6 universities in St. Petersburg, Florida. They have a beautiful makers lab where either the physics students or the entrepreneurship students go and kind of make things. They have 3D printers and they have woodworking lasers and stuff like that. Well, a lot of the product you can prototype right there on the college campus. Next slide, please. So this is written by a business professor, not an psychologist. And you'll notice number 4 in the entrepreneurial process is actualization. I'm not making this up. They said this before they knew about Michele and Maslow. Actualization is one of the 5 processes to be a successful entrepreneur. And it's the stage in which you operate as an entrepreneur utilizing the resources to achieve your goals and objectives. And ours were very clear. We wanted to be self-employed in orthopedic physical therapy, self-employed in group benefits, group insurance, and property and casualty for 3 specific kinds of accounts. And the beauty of specializing is you can tell people you don't handle that kind of insurance and go on and just make more friends and more progress in your 3 specialties. For instance, I belong to all the trade associations for utility contractors. I think that was in Atlanta. The rural electric co-ops have state associations wherever they are. And then I subsequently did rural telephones off the same company because most people got out of the rural electric business because the electrification of one of the customers out in the field was what they call absolute negligence. There was no way you got out of a claim if someone was out there putting up a high TV antenna and crossed the power line and electrocuted themselves. I actually had a claim like that. Next slide, please. So it's very much the process of entrepreneurship. There is my beautiful formula. Am I not showing it yet? Do you have a passion? Now, I know you were born with creativity, but have you become passionate about something in your life, like a sport, a hobby, an interest, a course you took in adult ed or school, or just something you haven't done yet but you'd love to do? You can do it. You can get a passion about it and make it your own business. So what we're going to do now, if you give me the next slide, is just take 5 minutes, and on those little index cards you got when you came in, this has got to be spontaneous, folks. No research, no Googling. The 3 top opportunities that you would like to pursue in your life, and just do them out of the blue, and I'll give you time, 5 minutes. Next slide. Like I said, something you value. It can be a belief. It can be a religious undertaking. Or it can be something you don't know how to make into a business, but you can be a consultant in that field. Can you do the next? Okay, they'll just leave this up while you think. Ooh, water. Let your mind wander. Anything's fair. You have to kind of consider your own skills, though, like I would never be a Michael Jordan, just as I would never be a Hank Aaron. I love the people that put their pen down already. Just 3. You can't keep going to 4. You notice we left this up while you were thinking. This is my absolute number one saying in regards to entrepreneurship. It is living a few years of your life like most people won't, so that you can spend the rest of your life like most people can't. And I swear to God, Donna and I have lived that. You will have to pay a price. There is a beginning phase in any business, like your 24/7, and we have some honest to God, real entrepreneurs in the front row here who can testify to 24/7, right? I bet you we could write a paper on it right now. This is what is my only bestseller. This is a 6-page laminated chart. And if you've ever been to college bookstores, they're in those racks next to the cash register, on nursing and psychology. I bet you Maslow's in there, and the math. But this one is the only one on entrepreneurship, which I wrote, 2012. I kept punching the button on the bar chart selection for entrepreneurship, and it kept coming up grant making. So I finally called them. I'm in Sarasota. They're in Boca Raton. And I said, where is the chart on entrepreneurship? They said, well, we really don't have one. Would you like to write it? So that's how this came to be. But if you really are interested in the principles of entrepreneurship, they're all here, just on 6 pages. There's a glossary, and there's a lot on my process called Lean Startup. Does anybody want to volunteer their passion? Sure.
I'm going to read all 3? Or just
Sure. Well, start with the first one. I'll see if it's viable.
creation,
Oh, my God. You can do anything. Okay, give me number 2.
stewardship, and service for Christ.
Oh, my goodness. And number 3.
Family.
Whoa. Those are very powerful. And you could probably combine them in probably doing some Christian work. But heaven knows there's some. Do you know JB has a charity? Y'all know about that? The School of Hope. And she started in Cambodia. And now she's in Indonesia. So there's an example for you. There's another guy named Tom Shoes. Anyone heard of Tom Shoes? You need to buy your next pair there. He's got everything. If you buy a pair of shoes from Tom, he will guarantee you he will give a new pair of shoes to a needy person who's shoeless. He mainly gives to people in Africa, but he also does in Mongolia and strange locations in Asia. But Tom's Shoes, another very many social goods. And you guys, all 3 of yours. That's powerful. So what are you doing right now?
I'm a word surgeon, and I help people put words to their passions.
Oh my God, you got to be on my website. I'll pay you for a page. Okay, next slide. I got to tell you about Lean Startup before we go. Where is it? Okay, in about 2008, they started using the internet, the World Wide Web, to invent things. It changed life. I mean, think of Airbnb, Uber. I mean, it changed everything. And the reason they could get evidence-based facts as opposed to guesses on the old-fashioned business plan was they would have another landing page and beta test it. And they would just keep narrowing their product or their service through beta testing. Maybe they have just a 1-page diagram. In the old days, you'd have a 40-page business plan that was based solely on guesses. Even the financial part was pro forma, nothing real. And with the Lean Startup technique, the father of it is a good, he associates with Stanford now, but a good Cal Bear from Berkeley named Steve Blank. If you can, write that name down, steveblank.com. He's the father of Lean Startup. He has a website where he gives all the information he's ever learned out for free. And he blogs. And he writes about the history of Silicon Valley. But Steve Blank lives on a hilltop overlooking the Pacific Ocean above the Santa Cruz Mountains in Pescadero. I've been to his house for a lecture social. And as we got off the bus to head towards the main house, which was solid special wood, the main part of the house is two-story room. I should say, venue. It's huge. Anyway, we have to walk by 2 Teslas that are charging and a huge pool in camp. In other words, he started like 8 businesses, never went to college. He was an Air Force retirement in engineering when he went to Silicon Valley and started this whole thing. And what Steve does is he came up with the idea of customer development. Evidence-based entrepreneurship is going to the end user and having them become your partner. They help you write out the 9 blocks on the one tool. Can I show the next slide? Which is called the Business Model Canvas. You can, we'll show this for a second. The benefit of Lean Startup is evidenced, facts. You can't beat it because it guarantees taking the lowest risk because you're basing your design on facts, and it guarantees less expense. You're not spending money until you know you've got something that has a market. When you know you have a market, it's not hard to take financial risk. Next slide, please. This is the one-page business model canvas. Now, if you were an undergrad at an entrepreneurship course, you'd have nightmares about this thing because in the original class at Berkeley, you had to fill the team. You'd have 2 or 3 buddies, would have to fill one of these out every week. So, and you had to, each person on the team had to go see 3 or 4 people, and you would stack up, they didn't use the computer then, stack up the canvases. And Steve Blank and his buddies, they didn't run the class. They sat in the back and threw darts. The teams ran the class, showing the results of the prior week. So anyway, don't worry about the other, there's 12 blocks. I'm going blank. 12 blocks. Anyway, don't worry. The only 2 I want you to think about is the one in the middle called the value proposition, which is what you invent, and the one on the far right called the customer segment. And if you would, next slide. Together, they form what is known as a product market mix. And I would spend 2 weeks making sure the team's got this right. You must have a compatible relationship between the value and the market. Sometimes you start on the right with the customer segment when they have a problem, and then you solve for the value as a solution. But more often than not, you start with the value as an invention or a new way of design. But this is the key, along with the evidence, customer development of Lean Startup. Next slide, please. So remember the actualization in the process. You've got to act to make passion work. But if you are choosing something you're passionate about, all those psychological factors come to play without you even have to think through it. They just happen. And that is the flow and the self-actualization. Now I'm going to show you a QR code on the next slide if you have a camera when I show it, and you'll get a free copy of my book, Set Your Own Salary. But remember the code Vegas. It shouldn't be too hard since we're in Las Vegas. The code is Vegas, and that site that'll come up, go ahead, can you show that? The QR code on the right takes you to the book, and that's what the book looks like. As I told you, my students named it at State College of Florida. But now it's the name of my website, because when I went from ClintonEday.com, which was a 9-year running blog, free blog on entrepreneurship, I had to have a site that had a new brand name. So my web designer and I chose, out of the blue, SetYourOwnSalary.com. But by all means, next slide, I want you to go home with my email and my website, because what I want you to do is believe in this formula. Now, I only show this slide for one reason, credibility. You must believe that Clint Day knows entrepreneurship. My father was an entrepreneur. I was an entrepreneur. I taught entrepreneurship. So those are the credentials of Donna and myself. By the way, since semi-retiring, she is now a doctor of physical therapy. She went back to school in her senior years and got a doctorate in physical therapy because she saw I got an MBA in my 60s. Next slide, please. That's the University of California at Berkeley. Beautiful place. Now, I rephrased my formula. Intense passion, plus lean startup, which includes customer development, equals not just success, roaring success. And each side of that formula is very important. You can't do one 40% and the other 60. You got to do it 50-50. And you've got to, create that burning desire by being passionate about what you're doing. And I can tell by just talking to my co-speakers here that you're passionate about your social good. It's beautiful. It's just, and there's so many good things out there. Remember, if you want to give away a little extra money, the School of Hope through Lady VJ is a good charity. Okay, next slide. That is my email, and now that you've taken a talk from me, you're like one of my students. You have authority and right to email me at any time, and I will answer. I get 100 emails a day. I call them, and then I answer any student first. And the website, don't you dare forget it, setyourOwnSalary.com. You can go to that website. Half of the stuff's free. The blog's still free. And half of it is monetized to pay the expenses. But if you join the club, called the Trup Club for Entrepreneur, you get a discount on everything on the site that charges money. You get a monthly meeting on webinar with other team. You become part of a group. And we have an interview every webinar with a successful entrepreneur. And I train a different subject every month. So I would at least join it for 2 or 3 months just to get the stuff that you get. But that's the website, that's my name, and I really welcome any questions. How about that? Before the end, right? It took a lot of practice. I didn't tell you the best part about this trip is we left Tampa yesterday, supposedly at a 12 o'clock flight for Atlanta to come to Las Vegas. We got out of there at 4:30 in the afternoon after the Air Traffic Control Center in Jacksonville shut down the whole state. They had a storm and they had a work stoppage. Apparently they're teed off with their unioners. And we were in the Delta terminal at the Tampa airport, and it looked like the Rose Bowl. We had so many people jammed in there. They were on the floor. They were everywhere. And we finally got out. By the time we got to Atlanta, both rebooked nonstops for the day with Delta had come and gone. So they fiddled around and they got us a nonstop to Salt Lake City. We got in there last night at 11:30. Or was that Vegas? We got in there about 10:30, and we got down here at 11:30 last night, which on the East Coast was 1:30, folks. And I promised Peter I would be here no matter what happened. But I want you to know my eyes are open. I can see, I can think. I had one of those Energizer barrels for breakfast. You can tell, right? Any questions, please? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that you can sell any business. So how do you sell a business when it is mostly owner-operator?
Well, what does it do? What does it?
Okay, so maybe it's like an excavating business. So you've got some equipment, but it's sort of a maybe 1 or 2 man show.
Kind of like auction equipment business? Or
No, like you're performing a service, so there's like an owner-operator of anything.
oh, yeah, it's a beautiful business. You can absolutely target a niche in the market. People who use that kind of equipment, and just discuss the benefits of it being less expensive because it's used, but what it can do. And you just got to reach that target. And whatever you do in today's market, this is 2024, you must use the web. You've got to brand yourself, either your name or your book, on a website. And there's 2 absolute axioms. One, you've got to have the website and use it for social marketing as well as just reference to sell your own product on it. The second axiom is a limited liability corporation, LLC. $50 to $100 with your state secretary of state corporate veil for just that little money. We didn't have that when we started. We had to be a corporation C, and it was very expensive just to file a subchapter. What was it? Donna did the accounting. Subchapter S. But you need a corporate veil. Why? I was in insurance for 35 years, and every liability policy written has exclusions. For instance, there's one on war. And if you were in the Gaza Strip right now, no coverage. They go to that first. But there's exclusions in every. So Remember, you need a corporate veil, and that's an LLC for dirt cheap. I wish I had had it. I have an LLC now just for teaching. Corporate veil. Did I answer it?
Yep.
Did I wrap?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you all.